Hi, everybody. So this week I am with Alison who I've wanted to talk to for a while for a lot of reasons. But mainly, if you know me, I'm not big on like weddings or dreaming of weddings. But this all changed when I saw these incredible weddings that you and your husband do through your company. And of course, most of them tend to be, or from what I've seen on your beautiful Instagram, which I will link, are overseas, especially in Europe. And we just missed each other in Italy, of course, where there was another spectacular wedding. So I'm really glad you're here. You're in Santa Barbara, California right now, one of my favorite places in the world. And I can't wait to talk to you about travel and weddings and how you got into the business.
So excited. Let's do it. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Of course. Well, first of all, I should ask, are you jet lagged? When did you come back from Italy?
Oh, gosh. I'm like, what day is it today? We got back on Monday, but, we've got it kind of down to a science where, like, if you land back in the U.S. or even in Europe, either way, you try and land at like 3 p.m. and then you just try and stay up like for 4 hours. And then you just crash. You know what I mean? So
I do, but I feel like you would be extra tired because I'm saying Italy because you put on the most spectacular wedding in Rome, but you were kind of on a tour. Do you want to name all the countries you were just in this short amount of time?
Sure, I got to think about that for a second. So we were in, we were in Paris and Provence, and then we went over to Rome. And then from there, we went to Marrakesh to do a tasting for a different client. And then we went to Portugal to scout venues for a fourth client. And then we went to the south of France to scout venues for a fifth client. So it just kind of happened like that. We were like, okay, we're going to be over there and everyone wants us to go rather than go back 2 weeks later because we have weddings the next 2 weekends in Santa Fe and Cincinnati. I'm like, it's going to be crazy, but let's just knock it out. And we did. And it was great, but it was crazy. But I still after 24 hours of being home was like, let's go back. That was a blast. That's the travel addict, you're like, I'm still going. As long as I'm still breathing, where are we going?
You can go. Well, I will say to you, I love following you guys on Instagram and your adventures because obviously you are visiting a lot of beautiful locations and a lot of incredible hotels because you work these are 5-star wedding experiences and they are down to every detail. They're so spectacular. And I think what I really like about the weddings that you do is that they feel so personalized and they're not they're not sterile in any way. It just feels so beautiful and tangible. It's like flipping through a Vogue magazine. I just want to walk through into the photo, which is so spectacular. And I think, you can tell me of all people the last 2 years during the pandemic where it would have been wedding after wedding, canceled, put on hold, we're going to do it again. And then the rules change. You can talk about that process, but that would have to be exhausting in itself. And now everybody is raring to go.
It was the craziest thing on the planet. And in ways, I think I have now blocked it out. You know what I mean? Because it was so traumatic. In the moment, I think we canceled, 2 years of events in about 9 days or something. Not canceled, but postponed. But still, canceled the date and then moved the date and then kept moving it and kept moving it and kept moving it. And for every client, we have 3 or 4 events. And then because we're travel agents, in addition to being event planners and designers, we have to replan all the travel of it. And I think I alone canceled 50 flights or something for our team in one night. It was just and then keeping track of all the credits. And I've learned that I will be loyal to whatever airline lists my credits clearly. And I don't have to find it. You know what I mean? So it was just, 100%. It was really crazy. Fortunately, we had such amazing clients and we have such a great rapport with our clients and so much trust with our clients. And so they just kind of leaned on us to do whatever was best for them. And we were able, the Rome wedding was our last pandemic wedding, essentially, which is amazing. It was the last postponement. Wow. And that was 2.5 years of postponements, essentially. But we were able to get everyone through, without spending a lot of money. And you know what I mean? I'm just really proud. It was a very seamless experience for, what it could have been. And so I'm really grateful for it. But yeah, it was wild. And in hindsight, like, I wish we would have had the foresight to know that we would be postponing so many times, because we could have taken a sabbatical. Like, that was the thing that really sucked about it, is that, like, we just kept working and working and working and working, and like, no end in sight. And I studied to be a counselor like 20 years ago. The reason I decided to be a wedding planner, just an event producer, is because I like to know that if I'm putting in the work, like, I can see the fruits of my labor. And what was frustrating about this is I just, like, who knew, and of course everyone's looking to us, even all the publications, they're like, when will the pandemic end? And I'm like, this right here, I don't know, it might look like a crystal ball. It's definitely not. I have no idea. You know what I mean? And so I feel proud that we were able to get through this, like, as painlessly as possible. But I will say, if there's ever another pandemic, like, we're opting out. Like, we'll take a vacation. A long one.
It's funny you say about the counseling, because if anything, it's the emotional wear and tear of the stop, start for everybody. So not only are you stressed dealing with all the details, but then you have devastated clients and probably people that are vendors that are counting on it, but they can't do anything about it either. And I know obviously I was in the UK and looking at the US, I could see waves of opening and not opening. And again, just state by state, which of course is also frustrating for you if you have places just in different states within the US. Mm-hmm. Every place is different. And then in the UK, we had like a different alert literally every week. And then I went every 2 weeks. But it was the same thing. I had a lot of members on my team that had all three people on my team. Three had waited for their weddings and booked and rebooked, I think 3 times each at least, because it just... what are you going to do? I'm sure you've been through it.
Yeah, and I
thank
think
God for
that's
the counseling degree.
Yeah, I know. I think that's where I'm proud too, is because we were able to also not just satisfy the clients, but also all of our teams, all of our vendors. Like, it doesn't, aside from the fact that I really wanted to support them, it also doesn't help our client if they go out of business. You know what I mean? And so just navigating all of that, it was just like one giant puzzle, but we made it through officially as of a week ago. We're done with that.
You made it through.
Now we're dealing with the other side of it, which is the demand. And the demand is through the roof. And I think we are really one of the only companies in our industry that's really looking at it like a travel experience and not just, a wedding weekend somewhere fabulous, and so because that's our niche, and we've made it that and nothing else. We're very consistent in our marketing and our branding and our vision for what we want. So many people are coming to us and it's like, insert fabulous location. And we're just like, there literally are not enough hours in a day. And we are turning down dream projects that Brian and I are just like, I can't, like, there's this one in Cape Town. Like, we've always wanted to work in South Africa, and it's such a great client. The thing is, they check all the boxes. We look for clients who check all the boxes, but it's rare that, usually it's like, but they have a giant guest count. Oh, but you know what I mean? There's always like one thing where it's not like exactly right. But as long as you have the rapport and overall it's good, it's like you can work through those things. The thing about it now is like everyone checks all the boxes, but we just can't take them. So we're just referring everyone left and right. We're just completely booked through 2023. And
okay, so I'll wait on my non-existent wedding until after.
And we have clients
I'll come to you for
a lot of former clients now want us to do their 10-year vow renewals, and they're just like, do I have to book you now? And I'm like, but now also I don't know where we'll be because we want to be living in Europe. And so there's that side of it, and that like I can't commit too far in advance because we're really sort of right at that point where even a year from now, we could be living in Europe. I don't know. So it's just.
Yep. And so we were briefly talking about this before we start. Yeah. Before we start recording, that's what I was saying. It's like I'm in exactly the same spot. And so many Americans live abroad in Europe now. And if you have your own company, it's actually much easier to do from a lot of visa standpoints. And there's wonderful places. And for you, I mean, I don't know, it was probably different. I mean, obviously the last 2 years were bizarre. But in general times, like, would you say the majority of your weddings are abroad, like destination weddings in Europe? Because that's what it looks like a little bit on your feed. But I do know, obviously, you do a lot in America. Yeah. Europe.
Well, a lot of the U.S. was a pivot, you know, and there's still several destinations in the U.S. that we're excited about working in. But I would just say that by and large, Europe just has so many more options, and the kind of events that we're doing are better suited for destinations like Europe or Mexico, you know, because it's this whole like vacation vibe where you can immerse and there's beautiful views and like really great service. And unfortunately, I don't feel that the U.S. Can compare. Like the service in the U.S., we've been in hospitality since 1999, you know, and so our events are very, hospitality focused and service focused. And I don't know, we work at the best, you know, properties in the world, and we go there and then we come back to the US and we're just horrified. We're just like, where's the service? So because of that, we are both having clients come to us wanting that, but also we end up guiding people towards where they can really get the most bang for their buck, you know? So 100%. The tricky part with Europe, it's the time change for us. So if we do have clients in New York, or I'm working evenings instead of right now, it's nice because a lot of our clients are in New York and I'm kind of done by 4 p.m. You know what I mean? So navigating meeting times, but other than that, Europe is definitely just it for us. Like it's just a matter of time.
And what kind of, just because we said it a few times, so if anybody's listening, what kind of is the size range of your weddings that you kind of work with the most?
Yeah, I would say most of our weddings in Europe are under 120 people. And that's just because the best venues, you know, tend to be more intimate. We're not really going into like the super resorts, obviously. Like we're going into brands like, you know, the Amons, or, you know what I mean? Like that Six Senses, like that kind of vibe. Belmonts, you know what I mean? So because of that, like you can't really create that experience for a large guest count. But with that said, sometimes people come to us and the guest count is the most important thing and we work with it. But we might then say, you're a candidate from Mexico. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, because we know each country so well in terms of what they have to offer. And, you know, it's just like, it's impossible to get all the things with that amount of people. So, but
it's true. And I can't.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, like a lot of our clients too, like we just met with someone the other day who they have 20 people. So now we're getting into the 20 people, the 30 people, the 40 people. And that's cool because the events themselves are still really, you know, it's like we'll have celebrity entertainment and like all the travel will be paid for. And like just it's very, very 5-star. But for a smaller, just treasured group of people. And that is, I think, what our future will be. It's just a matter of time. So,
I mean, I feel like that's kind of like the perfect number. It's spectacular. And again, I'll link your Instagram feed because I think people, when they understand and see your type of events and locations, their minds are going to be blown. So maybe I should rewind for a second. Let's see how you started. Where are you from originally?
I'm actually from Santa Barbara, California, believe it or not. Carpinteria right outside. And also the San Francisco Bay Area. But then moved a ton in high school, moved to Portland, Oregon, and then moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is where my dad's from, Detroit. So I made my way to Detroit, which is where I met Brian in like my early to mid 20s. And we met working in the hospitality industry. We met working in a bar. We both thought that hospitality was something you did, you know, to get through college kind of thing. Because, in Ann Arbor, Michigan, it's not like you had like career, you know what I mean? Like you had managers of restaurants, but like that was about it in a college town. So, he studied essentially to be, he got degrees in art history and film, and he thought, he did an internship at the MoMA, thought he would get into, being a curator. And I very much so wanted to be a counselor and to help people. And we both explored that. But I don't know, we just like hospitality is in our blood, and we both like found such a mutual passion and joy in that industry. And I think because we started so young in it, we both started at, 16, 17, 18 years old in hospitality. It was like all we knew, and we were really good at it then. And then all of a sudden, weddings started to pop up, and I never, ever, like, first of all, I didn't even want to get married. Like, I wasn't really like, waiting for my wedding, right? No. But I loved the idea of like the fact that you could create this food and beverage experience, but also manipulate the lighting and the music and just create like a really experiential type of event. And I looked around at the wedding industry. This was 2008. And like, no one was really doing that. It was very still much so like ballrooms. And I was like, well, this sucks. Like, gosh, wouldn't it be cool if like these events were just like in cool warehouses? And fortunately, I don't know how I had that foresight, because I didn't really see it happening around me, even on a personal level. I got in before the industry like really understood that, you know what I mean? And so I started doing those kinds of events before they were really a thing, before we had wedding blogs. You had Martha Stewart, you had The Knot, but that's really it, And so I was just able to get in then. And then, I really wanted to work for another company. I thought that I would just literally start doing weddings to get a portfolio to work for a venue, which is crazy. It was never my goal to be a business owner. But then, I skyrocketed. We moved our business. We were living in Seattle at the time, and we moved it back to Ann Arbor, Michigan, partially because of the economy collapsing, because it was that moment where it was like, what is even happening, but also because we just had such a huge market there. And we knew that if I was to start a business anywhere, you want to go where you actually know people. So we moved there, signed a 6-month lease, because we didn't even want to sign a year lease, just to like see how things would go. And I got a wedding, I think, within 2 weeks. And so I placed an ad on Craigslist, literally on Craigslist. And I was like, $150, I'll do your wedding, and it was mainly from a coordination standpoint, not from a planning standpoint, but I was hungry. Like, I was like, this is it. I knew it hit me like a ton of bricks. This is my career choice. That's it. Started doing weddings. Was doing like 35 weddings a year for those first like two and a half years. So really got an understanding for at least the foundational stuff, like how do you deal with sizing of tables and like rules and regulations and like how to manage, 75 people simultaneously and just all of those things. And then Brian was sort of having a career crisis in that he was planning on opening his own bar. And then he was like, I really don't want to work until 4:00 in the morning. And we were two ships sailing in the night. And it was like, do we want to be roommates or do we want a marriage and a partnership? And I was like, rather than do a bar, maybe we like buy a venue. And, you, with all your hospitality experience, come on board with me for a summer. This was 2010, I think. Come on board with me and see, what the venues are doing. And if you think this could be, a path for you. And by the end of the summer, it was like, no more venue. We are a partnership. And here we go. So
your true partnership. Well, I was going to say two things about that. One, hospitality, that's same for me. Like 15, 16, 17, I went for working in cafes to waitressing to bartending. And that's, I was bartending in nightclubs in college. And I think there's kind of like a hustler mentality, and certainly like I will figure it out and wear 10 hats, because whether you're a bartender or a server, you kind of have to, and you're dealing with all kinds.
Exactly.
Have to do it.
Exactly.
And, going back to the counseling, it's like you earn your free psychology degree, basically dealing with every personality under the sun, whether you're like happy, sad, drunk, sober, like you're kind of getting all of it. So that's a huge part. And the second part, I think people don't realize from being, an entrepreneur, and I'm one myself, I've always dipped in and out, is you have to just jump in. And so many times that I see people give advice, it's usually like, offer some initial rounds for free because you're learning as you go, or for like a low cost and like you're figuring it out, because how else are you going to learn? And you're going to learn so much more, even though it's super scary, doing it yourself rather than an umbrella under. And sometimes larger corporations, and I can speak from hotels too, right? They're not necessarily on the pulse of like what is happening in terms of trends or what people want now. And it's very limited to like a checkbox of this is what we do and this is how we do it. And clearly your weddings are very customized. So when you were first starting, were a lot of your weddings like local to the West Coast, or were you starting to, how did that branch out happen to like being more across the States and into Europe?
Yeah, no, well, they were in Michigan, and they were all in Michigan. So we ended up spending 8 years in Michigan doing primarily Michigan weddings. Like we had a wedding in France. We worked for some people in Mexico, but ultimately we produced 250 weddings in Michigan. What was cool about it is that even though they were primarily in Michigan, it was so many different types of venues, so many different types of vendors, people from all over the world, just because the University of Michigan is like a world-class, school.
That's right.
So we catered to people all over the world, but it was primarily, destination for them, not for us, And it didn't really hit me, even though we had done destination weddings. It didn't really hit me that was like the goal for our future, because I was just so focused on like learning the craft and really being an expert in every which way, and learning how to be profitable, and learning how to, develop our internal process as a business, and learning how to be a partnership, and all of those things. And that took 8 years. It just did. Yeah. And then finally we woke up. I had been begging to move back to California pretty much every time I came home. My brother's here. A lot of my family is here. And it's just where I was raised. And even though Ann Arbor is like, I consider myself to be like a Michifornian, like I'm like half and half at this point in my life, and I cherish there so much. I just felt so limited, and I felt very much so like I wasn't being true to who I was, at the core of my being by staying. And so even though we were, one of the top wedding planners in Michigan, and like we were booked 2.5 years in advance and all of that, it was like more frightening to stay than it was to leave, And so I was terrified to leave because, it's our only income together as a, husband and wife, and that's it. But I was just like, I've got to do this. And so I finally convinced
in your
Brian.
Gut, if your gut's nagging you, you're like, you gotta go. Yeah.
Yeah. I convinced Brian to do it. We ripped the Band-Aid off and we moved back here in 2016. So almost 6 years ago. And right away, like we came here with the destination wedding thing in mind. We realized California was more of the same of what we had in Michigan, and in ways like easier, because we no longer had to deal with like torrential downpours every Saturday and tornadoes and like crazy weather, like crazy tense. Like everything here is like, oh, it's just al fresco. And I'm like, I will literally do this with my eyes closed. And ultimately, that's not good for me. Like I'm a person who needs to learn, needs to grow, or I will be bored and I will just quit. Like I just can't do it. So started off with destinations, and a lot of people don't realize if you want to do destinations, you can't do the local stuff anymore. Like you can dabble in it here or there, but you have to be consistent in your brand and you have to make a choice. And for us, like we had already spent so many years traveling too. We were already travel agents. Like we had a lot of relationships built, and it was like, we knew we could do it. It still came with a lot of, learning curves that are still ever present in every new destination we work in. But like we thrive on that, and we couldn't do it any other way. So now we're about, almost 15 years into owning this business and 13 years or whatever into our partnership. And of that partnership, half was learning events together and the other half was like learning the world and destination weddings. And so this will definitely take us to the end. Yeah.
Well, I think that's what makes it so special. I mean, you can really tell that, the passion that you and Brian have for these projects because you're very invested. I can't remember if I asked you this before, but then considering you do all these grand weddings, did you have a grand wedding or were you the opposite where you're like, we'll just get married and we're going to keep it low key?
No, I wanted to elope. I feel how it went. Granted, he proposed 15 years ago now. We've almost been married for 13 years, but it's hard to remember exactly how it went down. But I'm pretty sure he was like, will you be my wife? And I said, yes, but we're eloping, right? It was very much so I don't want to have a wedding. I really just was not interested. But it's funny because if you asked me that now, knowing the weddings that we do, which are really cool travel experiences, I would have been like, yes, oh my gosh. We did have a wedding. We had 50 people in our backyard. It was family style meal and, Motown music. And I grew all the herbs for our cocktails. And it was definitely true to who we are. Yeah. It was so, it was perfect, and I feel so grateful because my dad's no longer with us and his grandmother's no longer with us, or his grandfather, my grandmother, all these people that were so cherished in our lives were there. And I can't imagine not having that. So I feel so grateful that we did it. But the productions that we're involved with now are just very, very different than, what we had for ourselves because we're different people. We are different people then. And also even now, just in terms of we're minimalists, we just don't need a lot.
Well, you're traveling so much. When you were younger growing up, and I always ask everybody I'm speaking with, did you travel a lot as a kid or were you more road trip, family, local? Because now you're everywhere. So how was that for you, or how did you gain an interest, or were you super interested in travel when you were a kid?
My parents did not have the means to take me anywhere other than on the 101 between Santa Barbara and San Francisco to drop me off every 3 months to each other. So that was the bulk of my traveling. I think I went to Michigan a couple of times as a kid. Other than that, I didn't leave California until I was 16 years old. You know what I mean? But I remember deeply looking at a map on, how you have those trapper keepers when you're a kid, your little binders.
I do. Yep.
And just seeing the U.S. map and being like, what is that? What is that? What is that? And I was just like, oh my gosh. And I would sit there and I would write in my road trip route. You know what I mean? So I remember that so deeply. And then also because my dad ended up moving to Michigan, I would get put on a plane by myself quite a bit. I was an only child. I would get on a plane and every time I landed, I was I could feel this just extreme excitement and wonder. And that's just what it was. So even though it was the lack of traveling itself, I still had an opportunity to feel that, joy. And that's just what that is for me, And so I didn't go to Europe until my mid-20s, until, Brian actually said we could go. And I remember being really intimidated by it and just being, you know what I mean? But then you go once and you're just like, what else is there?
You're hooked.
You know what I mean? And now I've been to, I don't even know how many, 40 countries, a lot, you know what I mean? And we definitely want to see the world, all of it, as much as possible. There might be a couple countries where we're like,
well, it's a common theme, I think, for Americans and Canadians, because I'm both, that we're obviously we have so much land and there's so many places, and like, a lot of us, we didn't, I mean, look, we're all products of like 70s, 80s, like there wasn't an abundance of money to like gallivant. I mean, I knew a few kids that had these Europe trips. I'm like, wow, they must be really fancy, because that wasn't my experience either. It's like road trips, and that's kind of, you stick to your areas. And then it's like, as soon as you turn the switch on and you make your first overseas trip, like you can never go back, because all of a sudden it's like every door is open and you can't wait to, and obviously you do this because of work, and I do this anyways too, is that you start stacking them. Well, if I'm going to this country, then I'm also going to go next door here and here. So why wouldn't I do 5?
Exactly. No, exactly.
It's like,
there's only,
it is an addiction.
It is. No, and it completely is. But I think it's, for us, like it's, we didn't have children. We chose not to have children because of our love for travel. Literally, that's what it was. I sat there and I was like, I mean, if by doing that, the thing, that people do, everyone seems to do, and maybe you should do, or whatever society says, like be a mother, I was just like, but I can't give up this love for travel. It's that important to me. And sure, you can do both. A lot of people do both, but I mean, not the same, not the way we do it.
It's not the same. And it's so interesting because, I've talked about this a lot on the show and like in some of my writing. And so I made the decision super early on that I did not want kids either, right? And I think like you have to make that decision for yourself, because there's years that people and still feel like they can't make a decision, and they follow some weird societal pattern where they are forced to, and then they're unhappy, which is terrible, right? The worst part is if you have a kid and then you regret it. That's terrible.
Yeah, I know.
And I always tell people, like, it's nobody's business, because it's bad enough for me being a single woman that gets those questions, but I have a number of married friends, couples that all made the decision also not to have children, and they get asked all the time, and it's like, again, don't ask somebody, because it's not your business, and everybody makes their own choices, and that's the point of how you want to live, and like to try to force to check some boxes just because somebody else down the line said so. I often tell people, I'm like, you're welcome. Now you can have kids in this overpopulated planet. I've decided not to have them. So I'm trying to even them out, but really.
Yeah. It's funny. We always joke that like no one ever asks us. Not our parents, not our friends, not our clients, no one ever says anything. And it's because they see that we're clearly living the life that we want. You know what I mean?
Of course.
But
you're loving your life.
Like, but I joke. I'm like, do you think I'm not fit? Like, is that why no one's asking me? Do you think I'm just not responsible enough? Like, ask me, and I'll gladly tell you that it's
because
direct. We're going to live. Yeah. And the thing is, for us too, we don't just want to travel. Like right now, what's happening is we're traveling because of work. We're barely traveling for fun. That's the side effect. But we're trying to be better at getting in a couple of days here and there. But that's just where we're at. Like there's just no time. But what will happen in the future is we will go from, traveling for work or traveling for fun to like living around the world, not just traveling, but like actually living around the world. And that was the goal that we had even before we moved to California. Do we go to California now or do we live around the world now? And we made the choice, like for our careers, let's go to California and hit it hard for at least like 5-10 years. And then let's rip the Band-Aid off. So now we're at year 6. So, like I said, we're getting close, and it's very exciting because I'm just like, I feel alive there. I think for me, you've been to our house. We don't have a television. Like we live a very simple life. And I think for me, I just identify with a non-US way of life in every capacity, so I'm excited.
And we were just talking about this because it's interesting because, being Canadian American, my American side of the family's been there for like 500 years, like a bazillion years. But I always felt like there's parts of it, the entrepreneurial spirit and I can do anything and the kind of like I don't want to say bravery, but the kind of jumping into stuff are all the Americanisms that I really like. But I always felt like something didn't quite fit for me. And I obviously lived in New York City for a long time, which is, I still love, it still has my heart. And then Los Angeles, and then I have family in Colorado and all these other places. And I kept trying to find the place where I could like fit. And I kind of came to the conclusion, like, I don't just have one home, it's always going to be many. And there's going to be phases of when that is. Yeah. And then when I went to Europe, I felt like I feel better than I have in so many years. I'm like, oh, this makes sense. And a lot of things that would be part of my daily, like, infiltrating my mind really between like the American media and like everything else just weren't part of everyday life. And I just spent a month on the road in Spain and Italy, and I never felt better. And I was laughing before this. I didn't hit record then, but I'll just mention it now. Had the weirdest like California, Santa Barbara specific, like Italy, Spain circle, because there's loads of Californians that have moved to Portugal and to Spain because there's lots of ways to do it, visas if you have your own company somewhere else. And then when I was in Italy, there was like a big convergence of like Californians there. So there was somebody I know from Santa Barbara who's a sommelier that is part owner of a restaurant there. I can't remember the name right now, but I can link it in the notes because it's really delicious. And she had connected me to a Canadian visiting there that we started talking about stuff, and then I saw you were there, and then randomly one day the Canadian gal sent me a photo that she saw on Instagram of this beautiful wedding in Rome. No reason for it, just sent it to me, and I was like, I know who did that wedding, and of course it was you.
I just love that so much. It's so funny.
Yeah, it's so random. But for you too, I mean, I think something about the California lifestyle, specifically Santa Barbara, the geography and a lot of stuff is very similar when you come over to a lot of parts of Europe. So it actually is like a very nice, easy transition. And I can just imagine how that's going to skyrocket for you for even more locations.
I'm so excited.
But a good question to have too are the people, like, you obviously work with a lot of teams on the ground, or you have to rely on a lot of people in these places. And that's some of the beauty of it, is building all these relationships, which will just continue on and on and on. Not just vendors, but people like physically working the weddings. Did you find that to be a challenge, or was it more word of mouth or people you met, or how does that work for you?
The wedding industry is actually a smaller world than you think. You know, at the 5-star level, there's just not a lot. You know what I mean? And so we sought those people out over the years, like pretty early on, and already had them in our back pocket for when those opportunities came, you know? And so we pretty much know everyone there is to know. And of course, there will be more people to come, but you really can't work in the 5-star world unless you've been in business for at least 10 years. You know what I mean? So it's the chances of like the new person coming, you know, a lot of planners at our level, like, you just don't really want to take the risk because you're just like, I'm scared, you know? No. But yeah, it just really depends. I think for us, like, too, moving to Europe is deeply personal. Like, we know the work side of it is totally fine no matter what. Like, no one lives in Santa Barbara, California. We only have a couple clients even in LA or the Bay Area. You know, we have a lot of clients like in Europe, actually. So that will work its way out, I think. And we already know all the venues. And for us, it's just about like waking up every day and like getting outside into the world and like seeing the way of life with your eyes and like eating the food and like just all of those things that are just like the simple pleasures in life, which we do have in Santa Barbara. We definitely do. The problem is that we are far too curious to stay in one place for too long. And the reason Santa Barbara has worked for us is because we're never really here. But, you know, as we looked into buying a place in LA during the pandemic, and we still might consider it and just rent it out part-time as we travel. We don't know. I mean, the housing market is bananas, so I don't know.
Oh my God, it's crazy.
But, you know, ultimately, like I said, just the lifestyle is just within us, and we need to be out there experiencing new things all the time, or we just won't make it.
This is 100%. So that's exactly how I live, which is why I think when I've moved so often. And the joke with New York too is like, I lived there for a long time, but I moved in and out of it like 4 times. So I think you have to, if you're that kind of person, You just got to go when the change is there, and it's about experiencing, and it's very different. And again, we made different decisions for our career and how we want to live our lives. And so we have that ability to do so, which is a beautiful thing because that's our priority. And so, like I said, I'm going to send you all kinds of notes that I got on Spain and Italy and everything else because I've been investigating it all.
Yes,
how about in terms of locations, is there a predominant location that people like requesting for destination weddings, or is it just all over the place? I mean, I feel like a lot of people would ask for Italy, but maybe I'm just making that up.
No, it's Italy. No, it's definitely Italy. Okay. I think what makes Italy such a big, contender for people is, there's just like, depending on where in Italy, it can be so different, So you can have your Tuscany wedding, which is completely different from your Lake Como wedding, which is completely different than Puglia, which is completely different than Rome or the Amalfi Coast, or, you know what I mean? So there's just so many different types of weddings you can have. It's not just about like you're having an Italian wedding or an Italy wedding. It's like, depending on your personality, Lake Como is more bougie, you know what I mean? And Rome is more hectic, and people love that, but some people could never have that, you know what I mean? And they need to go into Tuscany and have more land. And so it just depends. We definitely scout Spain a lot. We will be pretty likely doing a wedding in Mallorca next year.
Beautiful.
Portugal's tricky. Like, there's just not a lot of 5-star places that aren't, kind of like the hotel ballroom, believe it or not. So we keep trying for Portugal. Even on this last site visit, we scouted for a client, but then the mosquitoes are really bad there because it's in the forest and it's right by the water. And so there's just these things that get in the way. You know what I mean? But overall, I will say, Italian's the safest bet or Italy is the safest bet in terms of like, being able to find a venue that you'll love, and not just be searching and searching. I mean, we've had some clients where it's just like, they keep searching and searching, and it's just like, it just doesn't click. Like, they shouldn't be in Italy or in Europe for that matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't. And you brought up Mexico. You brought up Mexico earlier, and like, that's a stunning location for so many reasons too. I think people don't realize, I think they just think about these tourist places, and I'm like, do you even understand how many incredible towns and spaces there are around the country?
Gosh.
It's amazing.
Mexico has our heart, and I think that's also for us for the future. Like, we're strongly considering living in Mexico half of the year and Spain the other half. Helps. We can, become fluent in just one language, and like the weather's good on both sides. And so I really see like Mexico. We're obsessed with Mexico too. And similarly, there's just so many options, But again, now we're getting people who want to push the envelope. So they're coming up with these random locations all over, and we're starting to scout Asia more. And you know what I mean? There's just so many options with that too. And so we're excited to work in Thailand and to work in Bali, and, and so just for us, it's like doing something different is the whole point, doing something unique and just really pairing these clients and their guests with the right destination. And so when we ask them, where do you want to get married? We don't just say like which country. We also say, what do you want to do on your wedding day? A lot of people want to surf. Yeah. A lot of people are looking for a wellness component to it. A lot of people are looking for a place that is super walkable. And, so we take all of that into consideration, and then we essentially pitch the countries, so...
That makes sense.
Crazy.
It makes sense coming into like, what do you want the experience to be aside from just the day?
Exactly.
I was just thinking about Spanish too, because I was literally Googling yesterday, like where to take Spanish lessons, and like, because whenever I do them online or an app, I'm not disciplined enough. So I'm like, okay, because my French is okay, but my Spanish needs some serious work. And of course, for you being in Santa Barbara, I was just thinking too, like what a merger of both Mexico and Spain being the predominant like background and historical context for Santa Barbara. I was talking about old Spanish days, that people like that was part of Mexico, which was part of New Spain, and it has that whole long lineage. So it makes sense. It's just following the historical trail.
Yeah. And being that I grew up in this area, you know, I was raised bilingually in elementary school. I have since forgotten, you know, a lot of it because I moved to Michigan and like no one speaks Spanish. But I still know the foundational conversational, you know, Spanish language. So when I go to those places, I can understand it really well. And Brian is like practically fluent in Spanish and Italian and has a large degree of knowledge in French. But when we move, wherever we go, we will be enrolling in an immersion program simultaneously. So that way, you know, and it also helps us meet people. I'm excited to meet like expats, like crazy people like us. I'm excited to meet them around the world. Like you,
there's so many. I mean, I was like literally stumbling over expats in Spain when I was just like everywhere. And I was Barcelona, Madrid, then down south, like everywhere. And Barcelona feels more cosmopolitan than ever. It was just people from everywhere that had moved there. And it's just like a bustling city. It's fantastic. So do you feel, I mean, obviously you're talking about how you customize things for different people. Let me ask about for you. So with your travels, was there a particular place that like surprised you or pleased you the most that maybe you hadn't been to before? Or you just like it, you just loved it? Location.
Matera, Italy is like unreal. It's where the Passion of the Christ was filmed. It's basically like one big mountain essentially with cave dwellings. And then they essentially have turned the cave dwellings into like nicer apartments, you know, that you can rent. And then on top of the cave dwellings, they have like rooftop bars and everything.
Oh my God.
And that place, Brian and I, like when you step away from it, the whole place lights up because they have candles on it and it's all stone. And it's just like one of those places where you're just like, wow, you know, because obviously Europe is so, you know, has been around forever, right? But then those are the places that just have only been modernized, like on the interior, you know what I mean? And you feel like you've just stepped back in time. They just actually came out with another movie, James Bond, the new James Bond movie. They filmed that there too. Unfortunately, I hate to even talk about it because it's like it will be over in about a year because everyone will know about it. But it's just like, so incredible.
Wait, was that the town from like the whole beginning scene, like when they're driving around in the shootout from James Bond?
I think so, yeah. And they're like racing.
I think it is too, because
Brian just told
I remember Googling it. I remember Googling it because I didn't know where it was. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Well, now clearly I'm very curious about that.
And
then obviously, I mean, you're both. I can't imagine. That's on my list. I just wrote it down literally because I didn't know where that was. How about culinary wise? Because you guys both love your food and your cocktails. So is there a place that stood out for?
You know, so what's interesting is that I'm gluten and dairy free, but I love food more than anything. That's like a recent last 3-4 years thing for me, but strictly, right? And so the US just has not caught up, and the US just, you know, really doesn't cater to my allergies. Even California, like it's okay, but it's not like they excel at it. Europe, however, is like, even Italy, when we were in Italy, around every corner, it was like, here's the vegan cheeses and here's the gluten-free pastas. And like, so that's just
crazy
like,
in
again,
Rome.
Right. But that's recent, like the past, you know, even since I've had those dietary restrictions, I'm seeing it left and right, you know? So I think for me, I have a little bit different of an opinion in that, like, I love food and I want it to be amazing. But then I also have this additional angle to it of like, I know how hospitable you are and how much you have your stuff together if you also make cheese out of almonds and cashews. And so, yeah, I think for us, it's added this extra, you know, layer of excitement for food to actually research these places and go into these places who are just being extra experimental, you know?
Oh, yeah. I'm very excited for you. And honestly, Spain had a lot of more of those choices too. And even in the UK, which I mean, it's not like nearly as healthy as some of the other European nations, but all the grocery stores had like huge sections now. Like it didn't even matter if it was small for like all these options. So you didn't have to think twice about it. Also, I will say I've only been back in the US for like a week and I already feel like off. And I don't know if it's because I'm trying to watch, like, was I eating more sugar or was I taking in, I try to avoid gluten and certain things too, but something has definitely shifted. It's very odd. But I think it's just,
no, it's definitely, it is different. Like all the chemicals and the food, like I'm really into that stuff and it is different. That's why a lot of people can eat gluten in Europe, but they can't eat it in the US. And they have different, they're using different cow's milk and all of the A1 versus A2 cow. Like there's all those things. But yeah, wine, we drank way too much wine in Italy. We were drinking like a bottle a day minimum probably. But it's like, what do you do? Like we really are passionate about wine and like, you know, so I can't change that. I don't know what to do.
No, listen, and I'm 100%.
You can't immerse.
I'm totally with you. Well, this is another side note, but I was investigating cava when I was in Spain because, you know, there's a lot of partnerships you can have to bottle things. And I was like starting to look around. So TBD, we'll just have like an endless supply of like sparkling wine.
Oh my gosh. But
there's so many good options.
And it's so cheap. It's so cheap, you know, like, it's like, why would you not, you know? So like even in Italy, it's like every meal at the end, we had limoncello and then we had our espresso. And it was just like, it's just the culture of like really immersing and slowing down and enjoying. And so I'm just, I'm like, you know, again, we look at our cat
I saw
and we're like, take your time,
kitty.
Prudence, take your time. But, you know, aren't you tired?
TikTok. I was going to say when I was, so in Europe, obviously, like I'm a big solo traveler and it's interesting because on TikTok, I see a lot of young women that's becoming a big trend. And over the pandemic, there was a lot of other women that picked up and moved. There was like a woman that really became popular for just like leaving and moving to Scotland. And there was like a young model when I was there in Rome and it kept on coming up on my TikTok feed. And she was solo traveling and she would take these videos of herself eating and stuff in Rome. She's like, look, I've lived in like LA and New York and London. She's like, I think the slow life is for me. And I'm taking myself on dates every day and I've never been happier. And I like said something underneath her. I'm like, that's really weird. I lived in those 3 cities and I'm also looking for the slower life. She's like, we all just need like one big party with everybody together that's celebrating this. And I went to an event in Rome and it was full of people that had made those moves. So I think there's really something to be said about that. One thing I was going to say about the food too is I joke a lot to my colleagues in the UK with all the vaccines. And I'm like, listen, I'm like, considering everything we've had in our bodies in America, it's like, put whatever you want in my arm. I don't care. Like, I've probably eaten radioactive food. I don't know.
And again, like for anyone who loves to travel, the vaccine was not even a question. It's like, how quickly can I get on this plane?
Give me whatever you want. I mean, I have a collection of masks too, because obviously they need a different mask to fly into Italy than somewhere else. I don't care. I have like everything. I have everything.
That was wild. It was wild. Yeah.
I had to buy it from a vending machine, I think. Coming from Spain.
the different. This should be interesting. Moving forward with the approach to this pandemic, you know, but I will say in all the countries we were in, like everyone we talked to, they were like, we consider the pandemic to kind of be over. Meanwhile, everyone here was getting COVID simultaneously. Like we're buckled down in advance of these next 2 weddings because everyone is getting COVID.
I'm still being like, I already had COVID. It could happen again. I'm being like very isolationist as well. I'm like, I'm okay kind of hanging out by myself. It's totally fun. So let me ask, I've taken up so much of your time, but I could talk to you about your travel and your events all day. But considering, you run your own successful, your successful business, all your travel, something I like to ask everybody is, what would you tell your younger self about adventuring around the world or learning from others around the world? We're starting your own business. What would you say to?
Oh gosh, I don't even know how to answer that. I think my younger self always had, this really curious spirit, and I would tell myself that you did it. Like I always told myself I wanted that. So I would tell myself that you did it and it's everything that you could have dreamed of and so much more. And for the business,
that's so good.
Yeah. And for the business, I would just say it's so much harder than you thought it would be. Yeah. In every possible way. But
then the irony is then you built, yeah, it's so hard. I mean, it's so hard. But then you also built this platform, into I'm constantly coaching people on all the incredible skills they have that they can apply to things outside like a 9-to-5, which is going to suck more of the life out of them, right? So it all depends on that factor. But I mean, kudos to you and Brian for building such an incredible business. And of course, I love following your travels, but I really like following all your chic outfits. So that's a whole other discussion. I don't know where you shop, but everything you wear, all between your earrings and your chic dresses, I'm like, wow.
Zara. No.
Good old Zara. Well,
it's not.
Let me tell you,
it's not. It's called how quickly can I order something because my flight's in 4 days and I can't wear this dress 100 times. And then I've got Brian being like, don't be the person with the roller bag. So then I have to deal with the packing and have light fabrics, and I wear the dresses because it's 2 outfits in one kind of thing. You know what I mean? There's actually
no roller bag. What are you traveling with?
I use a backpack, a Tortuga backpack, and it basically opens, like a suitcase. You'll have to look up Tortuga, like turtle. Turtle in Spanish, but yeah, it's fantastic. Sometimes I have a roller bag, but for the most part, Brian just doesn't allow it. It's our thing with marriage. He's okay with all the other crazy stuff I do, but don't be the person with the roller bag. I'm embarrassed. You know what I mean? And that was the thing about that wedding with the linens is that we had to carry, you know what I mean? And up the metro and on Ryanair and paying for the bags. And I was just okay, I will literally just book laundry every 4 days at an Airbnb. So then you can just keep,
That is so good. I feel I try to be compact. I am not. I do have a small roller and then I have another small handbag. I have a whole thing. It's ridiculous and I should get better. Yeah. I mean, judging on the storage unit that I just saw last week, it was horrific. I have a lot of stuff.
Oh God.
So
yeah.
Get better.
And we'll be there. That's the thing. We'll probably sell everything, but there's certain things that I was just telling Brian, I was we're going to have to road trip it to your dad's and you know what I mean? Drop it off and put it in his basement. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, listen, storage is totally fine. I can give all kinds of tips on I've used them all over the place. And also shipping stuff to Europe is really not bad. I did it obviously there. And for alternatives other than the big crates, you can do this other stuff. I will give you all the notes, but I will not waste any more of your time. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this, you want to get married, you have to book now for 2 years from now, right?
Exactly. You kind of do, but don't hesitate to reach out because we'll always refer you. We're friends with so many planners, you know what I mean? And we can be a resource for people nonetheless. So
good point. Well, I look forward to having margaritas or wine or cava in person, wherever that is.
Yes, we will make it happen. Let's be in touch soon. And thank you so much. I so appreciate you.